A very welcome to the closing session of the 5th Just Transition platform meeting today on the 12th of May 2020. Today we would like in this session focus on people-centered just transition. It is my very pleasure to facilitate this session. My name is Carsten Rothmaller. I'm working for ICLEI Local Government for Sustainabilities at the European Secretariat, and I'm also happily to be part of the Coal Regions in Transition Secretariat. Let me introduce a little bit the shape of the session. The people and life-centered aspects of the just transition are often unexplored and less defined despite their high importance for the success of the transition process. Human and cultural factors like needs, beliefs, and values are influencing significantly our behaviors and decisions. Understanding and putting them in the center of the transition planning and implementation will facilitate the socio-economic change and its acceptance. Furthermore, education, culture, and art play an important catalyzing role in the shift towards new values and shaping the post-coal and post-carbon identities. The objective of this session is to show different life-centered perspectives in decision-making processes related to the just transition. The session will be in the format of 2 rounds of panel discussion. The first round is prepared by 2 keynotes focusing on the understanding of the facets of people-centered transition. The second round is focusing on working with people, shaping the just transition. And there will be 2 statements here to inspire us from different stakeholder groups. Having said that, I would very much like to call now to the stage our 2 keynote speakers. Marie-Claire Brossois, she is senior lecturer in the energy policy at the University of Sussex, and she is co-director of the Sussex Energy Group. Her work examines questions of power, politics, and influence in energy, water, and climate governance contexts. She also works on broader issues of social change and public participation in low-carbon transition. Marie-Claire, thank you that you're here. Secondly, Julia Saban. She is policy assistant to the Director General in DG Regio, supporting with policy advice on regional policy and the functioning of the DG. Her experience in cohesion policy and structural changes covers negotiations and program management, supporting member states to design and implement structural reforms, complementing by years of implementation of projects on the ground. Thank you both for being here. And firstly, turning to Marie-Claire, you're part of the research society, researching on the topic of just transition, and I'm sure you have brought with you some latest findings here in this case from a project called Cintrend, and you're talking about coping strategies. Please tell us, what is it about?
Great, thank you, Carsten. So yes, as you've mentioned, we've been doing quite a bit of work for the past few years on examining how different actors, different people, governments, businesses are coping with transitions. And this is part of a broader project called Cintrend. So if you could advance the slide, I'll just talk a little bit about the Cintrend project. Right, so Cintrend is a Horizon 2020, an EU project that's looking at how different regions that are coal intensive or other carbon industry intensive and how they're transitioning. So how they're going through the process of figuring out what comes next and supporting people in that process. There are 4 focus areas in the Cintrend project in Germany, Poland, Greece, and Estonia, which we look at in our inventory of coping strategies, although we also look more broadly at other places in Europe that are carbon intensive and trying to go through transitions. If we can go to the next slide, please, I'll talk more about what we found in our inventory of coping strategies. So basically, we've found a really wide range of strategies, but that how people cope depends on their context. So who they are, the situation that they're in, the country that they're in, and all the supports or policies or programs that go with being in a specific location, and also the resources that they have. So this can be the money they have available to them, the information resources, the networks, the personal connections, and this can be as individuals, as people, as workers, or it can be as governments or big companies, small companies, all sorts of different actors. So in the inventory, we've been tracking things like the actual actions, but also when they started, when they finished, whether they were successful or not. Many of them are still ongoing, so we don't know, but we have some idea of how things are going. And we found that there are really three categories of strategies. The first are resistance strategies, so where the transition is happening, and the response is to push back. So, for example, in a number of the coal regions, we've seen miners or unions pushing back initially. And so that would be things like strikes or sit-ins or protests. We also see governments sometimes continuing to expand coal or take actions to push back against decarbonization policies. We've also seen, as the transition moves along, you see much more adaptation. So this is where actors or people or groups look at the transition and say, okay, this is happening. How can we make changes so nothing is too disruptive, but that we're able to sort of roll with the changes? So we're maintaining the structures, we're maintaining the ways we go about things as much as possible, but we might be substituting an energy supply, so switching renewables switching to renewables from carbon-based fuels. We might be splitting companies to isolate carbon-intensive parts of the company from renewable parts of the company as those companies try to change their business models. And there are quite a lot of adaptation strategies. But we're also seeing transformative strategies. And this is what I'm mostly going to talk about today, because these are the strategies that tend to be much more people-centered. And these are strategies that are, when faced with the transition, it's looking at this and looking to shift the fundamental structures and ways of doing things, ways of living and being and operating that may have contributed to the need to transition in the first place. So they tend to be much more disruptive. It's also sometimes hard to tell if something is an adaptation or a transformation while you're in the process. Sometimes you don't know till later. So we've had to do make some educated guesses. But they tend to try to get at more structural issues. So to give you some examples of these, we can go to the next slide, please. So the first type would be strategies that are collaborative. They're collectively developed. They're broadly inclusive. Often they include deliberation and debate, and they bring people together to try to come up with strategies together. So some examples at different levels include in Germany, we've seen a coal commission where at an institutional level, they've tried to include all the main actors who have a stake or an important role in the transition, to get them together to talk things out, to come to a consensus about how to go forward, not an optimal solution for anyone, but something that they can all live with. And this is, I'm sure many of you are aware of the German Coal Commission process, and it's not without challenges. Collaborative processes like this are often quite challenging, but the idea is to get people involved so they're invested in seeing the solution advance. At another level, in Estonia, they held some vision days where they tried to bring people together from across the region to talk about what they wanted to see for the region going forward. So key to these strategies, though, is that follow through and implementation are really important. So it's necessary to make sure that if there are plans agreed upon or ideas that come out that are consensus-based, there needs to be a plan for meaningful implementation and follow-through. Otherwise, it's really easy to break trust and to lose people along the way and end up maybe in a less people-centered place than you had been when you start. So commitment is important. Another people-centered transition that we've seen come out in the inventory is the effort to create new economies that address some of the systematic inequalities that are there in our current system, to create new economies, new ways of doing this. So, for example, in Western Macedonia, we're seeing that some of the coal regions, the towns and the mayors there have come together to create energy communities. So this is an attempt to change who's benefiting from energy generation, energy production, and to distribute those benefits more widely, not just to a company and the shareholders, but to people on the ground. And finally, at sort of a more individual level, another strategy we're seeing are programs that meaningfully work to retrain people, to provide them with new skills and opportunities if, for example, they've been working in a mine and they don't have easily transferable skills. But again, key here is recognizing that these are whole people, that while they're retraining, they need support to take care of their families. There need to be other opportunities out there. So it's an approach to retraining that is not just enrolling someone in a class or a program, but recognizing that they are a whole person. So those are a few examples, and then if we go to the next slide, I'll just make a final comment about what we've settled on or what we've come to as really important in thinking about how we address these transitions in a people-centered way. And that is that if we focus on addressing current injustices, then it's likely that those solutions will be more inclusive and more just. So there's lots of talk about, well, we need to anticipate injustices in the future. And yes, we absolutely do, but there are inequalities right now. There are exclusions from decision-making processes, from economic benefits and opportunities right now that can be addressed with our transition strategies. And so the one thing that we'd like to highlight with the outcome of our inventory is that really focusing on these current injustices and how we can meaningfully address those, paying attention to inequalities, paying attention to those current existing injustices will set us up to do things in a way that may help us create a world that is meaningfully and substantially better moving forward. And I think with that, I would say thank you. And also, I can just flag in my final slide that we do have a Cintrend event coming up on Thursday for anybody who is interested. There's another slide if you want to show it, but I'm not sure if somebody else will mention it later. There it is. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marie-Claire. Indeed, wonderful to listen to your research findings here that are quite also differentiating the picture of resistance, adaptation, transformation. I'm sure several stakeholders are struggling sometimes. Where are they within this process, which can be disruptive, as you were saying? So having clarity a little bit also with that structure might be quite helpful. We will come back to that and come back to your important messages you have sent to us. But having said that, let's look at first into another aspect of understanding the people-centered transition, and here being inspired by the new Bauhaus initiative presented by Julia Saban from DG Regio. Julia, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Karsten, and thank you, Marie-Claire, for these inspiring initial thoughts. I will try to walk you through the main elements of the European Bauhaus initiative and also to outline the main links to cohesion policy and just transition in general. Well, the European Bauhaus is a very nice project because it's a project that speaks about hope and how we need hope these days and new perspectives. It aims at bringing a creative culture dimension to the European Green Deal and also to transform our places and improve the quality of our daily lives. In doing so, the European Bauhaus very much depends on the quality of local co-design processes. And I'm really happy that Marie-Claire already mentioned the adaptation and the transformation efforts, because this is the moment where I would like to pause and reflect a bit down on the relationship between the European Bauhaus and cohesion policy. Well, as the initiative revolves mainly about on spaces and places, if we think about the many years of experience of cohesion policy in undertaking and supporting local transformation processes, and its underpinning its commitment to the partnership principle, then of course cohesion policy couldn't be anything different than a natural partner to implementing the European Bauhaus initiative. Furthermore, we speak about involvement of communities, co-design processes, local involvement of stakeholders. Well, I think here again, it rings a bell. And if we think about the elaboration of territorial just transition plans that is depending on this type of engagement and local participation, we already have a very good underpinning, a strong underpinning for distilling further European Bauhaus related ideas and project ideas along the way. Furthermore, if we speak about territories planning or undertaking a transition pathway, we usually refer to very condensed, compacted communities that share almost a highly specialized and mono-economic culture. There is a great opportunity therein to transform this very closely knitted sense of belonging, and by involving local stakeholders to shape up a common future, to develop a transformation pathway and a new ethos for these territories. And here is where European Bauhaus comes as an opportunity by focusing on the local co-design, on the multidisciplinary approaches, and on the involvement of all those who have a saying in delivering and developing this transformation pathway, whether we speak about the citizens, the architects, the designers, the mayors, the NGOs, those who are the critical stakeholders on the ground. If we move to the next slide, I would highlight the main three transformations that the European Bauhaus aims at achieving in the next years. One, of course, is of transforming places on the ground. And we know that each territory comes with its own challenges and opportunities, and therefore we only need a place-based approach and a robust underpinning behind the development process and the transformation pathway of these territories. Secondly, is about enabling an ecosystem for innovation. That could refer to, for instance, advanced technologies or materials that would be used in energy efficiency projects, but also about adapting local crafts and knowledge and bringing this knowledge, let's say, merging it with the novelty of technologies in general. Thirdly, and also very importantly, is about diffusing new meanings, about transforming the way we live our lifestyle through education and culture. And this is basically what the European Bauhaus aims at achieving. It aims at bringing the sustainability, the quality of experience, as well as the inclusiveness throughout the development process and in all the facets of a planning and programming exercise. Here again, I would like just to reflect briefly on why these three transformations are relevant for areas undergoing a just transition process. Of course, as human beings, we shape the visuals of the places we live in, be it a town, be it a space, or a building. And if we think about carbon-intensive regions or the coal regions that were mentioned before, we have all these installations, all, let's say, the majesty of a former industrial glory that is visible to us and that dramatically transformed the landscape and the visual of these territories. The new European Bauhaus basically comes with a perspective whereby by contributing locally, by coming with new ideas on how to transform these spaces and buildings and places, people can find new meanings. And they will find these new meanings not just by reinterpreting the, let's say, the functionality, the utility of those spaces, but also by increasing the level of usefulness, the quality of experience, increasing their accessibility and affordability. If we speak, for instance, about social housing and other elements that citizens can use in their territories. And these are the meeting points, let's say, between European Bauhaus, cohesion policy, and in general, the support that we provide to areas undergoing a just transition process. Now, if we move to the next slide, I would just like to mention some of the elements that bring us closer to the delivery of the European Bauhaus. As cohesion policy, our main aim is to sit together with member states and explain these underpinning principles and help member states and regions to take them up by including them naturally in their strategies, be them territorial strategies or socio-economic development strategies. Then step after is to reflect the European Bauhaus in the programming documents related to cohesion policy of the programming period 2021-2027, and we do so by agreeing with member states that whenever relevant, our programs for the different policy objectives and types of investments that could support the European Bauhaus will do so. And as we speak, we have more than 20 member states that included such commitments already at the level of their partnership agreements. And we have some tens of programs that include an explicit reference to supporting the European Bauhaus delivery. Most often, this type of investments refer, for instance, to energy efficiency projects, be them in public or residential buildings, increasing the use of renewables, but also to territorial urban development projects, social housing, innovation, and advanced materials. If we move to the next slide, I would just mention that as any transformation process, the take-up of a new initiative requires some upstream efforts. And being knowledgeable on the difficulties, on the inherent challenges of member states and regions in adapting their delivery machines and programs to take up such a new initiative, in DG Regio, we plan, starting with last year, a series of dedicated actions to support the early years of delivering the European Bauhaus. And I will start by mentioning something that is very new to us, because last year it was really the first time when DG Regio, together with colleagues in Joint Research Center who are coordinating the European Bauhaus across Commission services, have ever done a competition for prizes. But we started a competition for prizes to collect inspiring examples of existing projects that echo the values of the European Bauhaus, but also of inspiring ideas coming from the younger generation, from those who are 30 years and below, that could lead us, let's say, in terms of coming up with examples and ideas of how to use the cohesion policy programs in order to deliver on the European Bauhaus. I warmly invite you to connect and vote. The public vote for this year's edition of prizes is still open until Monday. And I can guarantee you that we have two prizes that will only go to, let's say, the best ranked applications by the public. As you will see in this year's finalists, as well as in the list of the previous edition, we have inspiring projects of transformations of social housing, of buildings in general, but also of former industrial sites, regeneration of urban areas, and not necessarily large cities or towns, that could be inspiring also for territories in just transition. Second to that, we thought that municipalities in general, be them smaller towns and surrounding urban areas, might have initial capacity gaps or difficulties in putting together the multidisciplinary approach and bringing the experts that would be needed to cover the 3 dimensions of the European Bauhaus: sustainability, quality of experience, and inclusiveness. Therefore, DG Regio launched 1 month ago a call for those municipalities that have a population below 100,000 inhabitants, therefore the smaller ones, to receive direct technical support from the European Commission and accompany them to prepare and to mature new European Bauhaus related project ideas. And the call is still open. We just decided to extend the deadline. There is written 23rd of May. Now it's open until the end of the month, until 30 May. And again, this is a call for all those of you who might be interested to apply, but also to spread the news. There are still 2 weeks left to encode an application to receive such support. For those who are already committed and for those programs that include references to European Bauhaus, we also prepared a model of a financial instrument dedicated to delivering the initiative, whereby managing authorities in general have the opportunity to pledge, to come up with a contribution from cohesion programs to a dedicated financial instrument that will blend together public and private resources, as well as a grant component accompanying a loan component. And we will be covering with the grant the technical part that is needed and the work that is needed to put together, let's say, the focus on local participation, local co-design, and to cater for the involvement of the local community in the preparation of such project pipelines. Last but not at all least, we also give initial support to innovative ideas on how to implement an European Bauhaus on the ground. And the very first call of the new generation of urban innovative actions that will be implemented in this program period will be dedicated to the European Bauhaus. And this will be launched later in the year, towards autumn. And it will be open to all municipalities with a population above 50,000 inhabitants. And this is just the beginning. As I was mentioning, these are support measures put in place to accompany the early months and years of delivering the European Bauhaus. And of course, the hope and the expectation is that many of our programs, including JTF programs, will be taking up this initiative, pledging, contributing with amounts, but further to amounts and dedicated calls or mainstream the European Bauhaus through qualitative process selections, we will be able to find the positive outcomes that this initiative seeks for, meaning the robust and the strong local involvement of stakeholders, and finding together a new meaning or a new perspective to improve the quality of life and of spaces in our cities and towns. Thank you very much for your attention, and I would be glad to take any follow-up question.
Thank you very much, Julia, for presenting this, presenting the New Bauhaus initiative, but also the opportunities that come with it. I can assure you that indeed local governments do have some gaps here. Good to see that addressed also with some specific support. I also very much agree on the fact that actually changing landscapes of, you call it even the majesty of industrial landscape, is indeed something fundamental for people that are quite used to see the existence of industry being part of even the working life, sometimes for the entire life and so on. But at the same time, there's also a changing landscape in terms of renewables. You talked about dialogues with place-based dialogues with communities. How do you see, and I would like you to answer very shortly, how do you see the switch to renewable energy here to be taken up as part of the New Bauhaus initiative?
No, absolutely, and this is a very good question. Thank you very much for raising it. it cannot be just about, I don't know, rehabilitating for the sake of energy efficiency one single building in an area that will go through just transition. And we shouldn't stop there. This is not the aim of an European Bauhaus, and this is also why I try to emphasize the intrinsic link between European Bauhaus cohesion policy in general, that aims at having this, let's say, outcome-focused interventions and the just transition. If we speak about the increase of renewables and the entire switch that a community should perform, then of course the involvement of local community is absolutely crucial, so that we agree, and this is why we have the engagement of stakeholders, on what is the better energy mix that the community should benefit from, what are the efforts entailed to reach that status, and how the different funds or support measures can accompany such efforts. Sometimes we speak about investments, about money, but sometimes we also speak about efforts that do not entail so much investment on the financial side, but rather perseverance, resilience, and adherence to the same goal and objective. And this is the opportunity or the meeting point that an European Bauhaus approach allows for, by taking this step back and allowing a bit of further thinking before jumping, let's say, in the pure renovation project or a pure rehabilitation of a space, which is at the end of the day the closest opportunity for spending some money. It's rather a way of embedding these principles in planning and programming than, let's say, a recipe or a list of conditionalities or a must-do bullet list that we are, let's say, presenting to member states. And it's nice that thank you very much. I will stop there here.
Yeah, thank you very much. I was just saying for this very comprehensive answer, Julia, thank you. You will not be part of the next panel, but we have actually also ensured the presence of the Bauhaus as part of the panel. So thank you, Julia, very much. I would like now to introduce the two panelists that will join Marie-Claire here in the first round. First of all, Françoise Pose. She is researcher and curator. She is the director of the program ESH 2022, the European Capital of Culture, situated in Luxembourg's former steel mining south and crossing the border into France. She is responsible and heading the promotion of the cultural and artistic diversity of the region. Françoise, thank you for being here. And further, Werner Müller. Werner Müller has been a research associate at the Bauhaus Dessau Foundation since 1991. Before that, he worked for the German Architecture Museum in Frankfurt, and his interest of work focuses on the collaborative processes and the interfaces of scientific design and curatorial practice. So with that setting and with these very diverse and competent people here in this first round of the panel, I would very much like to ask and pose the question to all of you of what is one concrete example that you can think of and bring to the table here that proves that it is better to build on people-centered elements in order to have a successful just transition? Françoise, maybe I start with you.
Right. Well, thank you for this introduction. Thank you also for both the keynotes that were so very inspiring. I hope I can bounce back, especially with the first example. So as you said, ESH 2022, European Capital of Culture, is situated in a part of Luxembourg that only 50 years ago was very heavily marked by the steel industry, and industrialization had changed the region completely. So in 1900, for instance, Belleval, where I am currently, the site of one of the largest steel plants in 1900 was a recreational area with woods and meadows, spring water sources, and that all, of course, disappeared with the heavy industry and the polluted environment. And the last blast furnace shut down in 1997 here, and since then nature has slowly started to take back its rights. And it is then also certainly no coincidence that it is precisely in this region called the Minette that a citizen initiative called Transition Minute was created in 2011 to prepare tomorrow's world without fossil fuel. And the founders of the movement believed that, everyone is capable to act, to be creative, to express their competences, to very concrete and positive actions, and thus to respond to the double challenge of climate change and social and economic crisis. So they propose now hands-on projects on a local and regional level, such as urban gardening, consumer actions, a green energy cooperative. They run Mesa, a grocery store, and with locally sourced food, combined with a restaurant, and facilitate a workshop centered around circular and collaborative economy, recycling and repairing. They have, of course, also a project for Ash 22 called Future, Forge des utopies tangibles, urbaines et résilientes. Urban Utopias, a laboratory of change at the crossroads between poetry and politics, arts and science, between reality and utopia. They have today regrouped about 250 cooperators, and they are supported by many different partners, such as the Ministry of Sustainable Development, the City of Ash, the National Lottery Funds, associations, and many, many volunteers, of course. So it is about coping strategies, about people-centered initiatives, and this is very important here in the region, bottom-up elements to have that successful and just transition, because it creates responsibility, generates participation, as has been said, empathy, very important, commitment, but it is also very important in order to make it work to have public financial support from many different partners. So this would be my concrete example from here.
Thank you very much. A firework of examples and good arguments here, indeed. Looking then to our colleague Werner, your example, why people should be in the center.
Yeah. Hello, and thank you, Carsten, and all the others. Nice to be here. I think I'm in a special role because I'm a representative of a historical heritage of the Bauhaus. I'm coming from the Bauhaus-Dessau Foundation. This is now World Heritage since 1996. And I have to talk from this special position. And I take over your asking for me, Carsten, make it personal if you like. And so I want to start with a short 90-second little story, very personal story that is not directly related to the current decarbonization issues, but to the shrinking city programs in East Germany from 2000 to 2010. Because we have many structural breaks in East Germany, as other countries in East Europe too. It started with the unification of Germany, it started with the end of the Soviet Union and all the things. And that means there was a lot of migration about working pollutions and other things in these times. And so we are really experts in transformation processes. And so I want to really talk a story about that, and I think it's quite transferable to all other issues of transformation. In the immediate neighborhood of our World Heritage Bauhaus building, all of us, the famous Bauhaus building in Dessau, exists a modern building from the 1960s, which was built originally as a supermarket in the first floor with a dance cafe in the second floor. From the late 90s, both are closed in reason of migration of work and other things. The building stood empty and gets more and more in bad conditions. Then the initiative, the process of converting the site into a library for the University of Applied Science Anhalt and the Bauhaus Foundation in Dessau. Also regarded to the process of transformation of existing buildings and libraries with the International Foundation of Libraries. So it was also a worldwide process where it was integrated. In this process of transformations, we involved former operators of a building and their knowledge of the place. Because the building itself, with its cultural history as a grocery shop and also as a dance cafe in the living side, is also a fixed part in the memory of a city society and the neighborhood. Not only we have two wonderful parties with them during the building transformation process, which takes more than 5 years. A former, now retired manager of a cafe assists today our library staff. That shows, I think, the building is new in function, is fully integrated in both international and locally, and receives great values of its transformation. And it exists now since 10 years, and this year in the mid of June, we will have an anniversary of 10 years of our library together in the new site. And this was a process of a complete change in thinking of town planning questions and issues in the years 20 to 2010. So it means, in the general sense, on the one side of the coin, it's a great world scale like the Bauhaus with the World Heritage, and the change of a city development after the unification in Germany. And on the other side, we have the intimacy of individuals, like the people that are working there. So how can we bring these things together? I thought this is one very important question, how we can also find the transmission between our structural levels we have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Werner. Looking at Marie-Claire, what is your example that you would like to bring to the table?
Yes, like Werner, it's not one that's focused on the current transition, but drawing instead on the sort of the longer work that I've done on collaborative decision-making processes. And so I've done quite a lot of work on these sorts of decision processes in the water area, and what I've seen there is that when you need a number of people to be on board, to act collectively as we do with decarbonization, to accept a solution, and to also offer their ideas to make a better solution, then you need to have everybody at the table. So I've seen very successful processes around managing water resources, where over months sometimes of meetings, of coffee and beer and pastries and talking about people's kids and getting to know each other, people who would not normally interact with each other come together to share ideas. And it's not always perfect. There are definitely disagreements, but it's a different way of making decisions, but people really do get on board and people are very much invested in seeing the outcome realized. So I think that's something that is quite applicable to the decarbonization processes that we're trying to undertake here. Again, often local, but a much more inclusive and directly engaged way of dealing with issues.
Thank you. Engagement here as well. A call for further questions to be posted into the chat. We try to answer all of them if we can, if time allows. I will come to that in a second. But maybe, Françoise, before you talked about laboratories, and laboratories, I imagine, for engagement, for social innovation. What facilitates actually acceptance? Is it social innovation in laboratories?
Well, there are many ways to interpret what a laboratory can be. Sometimes having coffee together and pastry is also a form of exchange and a laboratory. So, but I, of course, from my side, I would like to stress, of course, the role of culture for a just transition, and also for, more generally for sustainable development, and culture, of course, as a means of artistic expression, but above all, culture as what defines us as human beings, with our histories, with our geographical roots, our understanding of places and spaces that we inhabit, our traditions, the knowledge passed from one generation to the next, and all the particularities, of course, that form our individual and our collective memory. So to me, culture plays an important role on different levels. It plays a role in a just transition or in sustainable development as an independent element and as a human right. It also plays a role for a just transition as culture allows us to break down abstract concepts to the level of human individuals. Culture allows us to tell stories. Culture moves and unites people. So it is there a very important element. There's also the role for culture as sustainable development, all-encompassing dimension, embracing the other ones, culture as knowledge making. So that was also something that was already mentioned, or knowledge sharing, and therefore a form of empowerment. And this is probably what I find the most important in really our fast-growing and complex world where people feel overwhelmed. It is so important to create these tools of empowerment, to investigate these intersections of exchange and critical thinking. So what we try to do also as a European Capital of Culture is to provide these tools to understand how to create a more resilient world through culture. And this is, I think, the way I would like to move forward to a just transition.
Great. Culture as a tool of empowerment. That is a great thought and message for you already to take it home and implement it. And if you need to get inspired, we will sure invite you for Luxembourg to see in practice. Werner, for you, looking at the Bauhaus initiative and your work in the foundation, which benefits can your model bring specifically to coal regions in transition? We also had the question here extended towards from the audience in regards to women and youth. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Now, as I started with my first report about our library building, I think it's not only fixed on the questions of the question of the transition of the coal mining period, because I think since the beginning of the 1990s, we are always in big change and transformation processes, also in policy as also in economical and nature questions. But what I think what we can take over from the Bauhaus, and where we're always looking for, also in our initiative with Saxony-Anhalt for the new Bauhaus in Europe, is the question about how can we put on the preliminary experiences from the methods of the workshop model of the historical Bauhaus to move transdisciplinarily and collaboratively through learning by doing on still unknown terrain into the future. Because if you look back on the 20s, the Bauhaus designed new models of living and dwelling for the industrial and coal age in proclaiming a new world. But today we know more or less we have only one world. And how can we deal with this question of heritage? And therefore, I think the Bauhaus, Dessau especially, was working a long time ago, since the beginning of the 1990s, also with the questions of the brown coal mining areas. Like we are given the initiative for the festival area of Ferropolis in Saxony-Anhalt. It's one of the famous festival areas for new music and young people now. Also working on the question of energy providing for festivals. And also we work together, as I talk about, is about the International Building Exhibition 2010 about shrinking cities in Eastern Germany as a model for whole Europe. So I thought we are both between this gap, on the one hand to be World Heritage, and on the other hand to be working close to current questions and using the methods of the Bauhaus, like the kind of this workshop model of the Bauhaus with its transdisciplinary and collaborative working. I thought this is very important to focus on questions like that, to get this kind of transmission between our structural fixed positions we have.
Thank you. Indeed, there are many engagement concepts that are available to us, and of co-design of laboratory incubators. I think we should be aware. If you are not aware, do research. Be encouraged to use different methods of engagement, of participation. Last question for this round to Marie-Claire. There was a question from the audience about what are the key conditions from adaptive to transformative strategies. Maybe you would like to pick up on this point. Thank you.
Yeah, happy to. A supportive government always helps. And a government who's willing to think about doing things differently, about potentially empowering different actors, having new ways of doing things, new economies emerge, and being supportive of that, and sort of cushioning that transition. That being said, not all governments are supportive in that way. And so that certainly doesn't mean that it's not possible to have transformative strategies otherwise. And I would say that the key difference between adaptation and transformation is thinking more systemically. And so not just looking at the immediate problem at hand. So perhaps job losses from a particular coal mine closing in a particular region, but looking more broadly at, okay, what's the economic structure, what are the ways of doing things, how do people live, what are the everyday practices, and how could we change those in a way that might better address the needs of people, or at least equally address the needs of people, but don't necessarily resemble the old way of doing things. And I suppose one more caveat I should give is that this isn't necessarily a hierarchy. We obviously don't want to see a lot of resistance, but some resistance is productive because it can produce strategies that force attention to people, or to the issues people are facing. And adaptation is good in lots of situations because transformation, as I mentioned, is quite disruptive, and we can only handle so much disruption as individuals at once. And so while we definitely need to see transformation as a society to address decarbonization and many other problems, there is a balance between adaptation and transformation and the pace at which we negotiate between the two.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Then for closing the first round, there is more to come. For us to get inspired about people working on the just transition, here showcasing their experiences. And I had the pleasure to discuss this with Rumiana Gotseva. She is Executive Director of the Regional Economic Development Agency in Stara Zagora in Bulgaria. And we recorded our conversation, which we just had. So here you go. Please listen closely to what she says from her experience. Thank you very much for being available, Rumiana, for being available for our questions here. And your perspective is very much welcome here in this debate to complement what we just heard from the panelists. So I would like to ask you the following 3 questions. First of all, about what were you in the last time inspired looking at people working on the just transition in Stara Zagora?
Thanks, Karsten, first of having me in this panel, because, you know, Stara Zagora is the biggest just transition region here in Bulgaria, and for us it's really important to be part of such kind of events, to hear other people, other colleagues from other regions, and our point of view also to be available for them. So this is really very interesting question, but I couldn't say that is the only last time inspired, because I've always been inspired by the energy of the people working on the present arguments, what scientifically and pragmatically sound that the just transition is possible with constructive and well-planned activities, and not only possible, but also much more than needed. And especially at the present time, when the narrative of the eternity and the uniqueness of the coal as a reliable source of energy become again so crowded. I mean, after the situation in Ukraine, this narrative is coming back again with very strong intensity.
Thank you. So then, focusing on energy of people, positive energy. I think there's also a connection to culture, to values and beliefs. So let me ask you, as a representative of a development agency, how does the development agency build on existing values and belief, maybe also cultural aspects, to promote the just transition?
Actually, I will start by acknowledging that it is very difficult to work in this region as Terra Zagora on this topic, because actually people not only working in the mining and energy complex, but also this linked with them industries, services, etc. People are worried and confused, and as a result, have a very some part of the community here in the region have very strong negative attitude towards the just transition. And the work of the agency, thanks to the Decarb project, has struck a balance in narrative and dialogue at the regional level in the last 2-3 years, because here in the region we also have a very strong community dedicated to the environment, conservation, just transition, climate changes, combat, etc. But the war in Ukraine and the energy house, because of that, swept away this really important progress in building and upgrading this culture here, oriented to the just transition, to the stopping climate changes, etc., etc. And now I could say that we should start from the beginning, almost from the beginning, because really the last 3 months it's crowded here to listen how we need calls, etc., etc. But it's not only in our region, it seems to me. It's happening in Europe also, all around Europe.
Thank you very much. I can confirm, but also what you said, that that projects like Decarb, European project that is here, is having a quite fundamental role also in changing perceptions of people, and you are resourced to get into dialogue with people that may have a different perspective, and that is quite valuable, I think. Let's use this opportunity here also for the last question about what is the most overlooked people-centered aspect from your perspective that is important for successful transition to happen, that maybe ministries or the European Commission should pay more attention to?
Okay, Karsten, you know that the agency is very active here in the region, organizing different kinds of events and with stakeholders and the wider public, and we're always inviting people from both camps. I mean, coal camps, if I could say in this way, and environment one. In order to have the different point of view, what actually people are looking, in order to be much more convinced into what the just transition is delivering for them. And it seems to me that people need to be reassured that this change to a more sustainable way of life will need be made really and managed in a fair way for them and for the regions, actually, that they will not lose their wealth, their incomes, their standard of lives, their perspective to development in career, and for their children also. Actually, especially in the eastern part of Europe, you know that this change started 30 years ago, not always successful. And here in the society, this negative experience also have a significant impact on the just transition. People just need to be reassured that everything will go in the right way, in the proper manner, in order this level of development, because we know that in the mining regions, in the region where the energy is producing, are actually one of the richest regions in Europe, and people need reassured that it will not be changed during this process. And actually, much more economic perspective we'll have here for them, for the industries, for their families also.
Thank you so much, Fumiana, for your perspective. Good luck with your fantastic work in Stansagora. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And with these words, we are back live, and I would like to introduce now our last panelist, Andrea Casamenti. He is policy officer at Solidar, a large network of civil society organizations and trade unions. Those mission is to advance on social justice in Europe and worldwide. Andrea, the floor is yours. Your statement.
Yes, thank you very much, Karsten. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be able to say a few words at this Just Transition platform meeting. First of all, yeah, I mean, Karsten, you already mentioned it, but what is Solidar? Our mission is indeed to advance social justice in Europe as well as in other parts of the world. And we work towards this objective together with our member organizations, who are quite diverse. They are trade unions, as you said, but also associations for cultural and social progress, NGOs providing education and training opportunities, and more. And organizations like Solidar's members, civil society organizations that work for social justice, they gather and represent hundreds of thousands, if not sometimes also millions of people across Europe, many of whom are in extremely vulnerable situations, people who are unemployed or with low incomes, or homeless, or people who are systematically disadvantaged, such as rural communities, racialized communities. And as I think all of you know, they are the ones who are most affected by climate change, by environmental degradation, but of course also by a green transition that is not designed and implemented in a just way. Whether it's in terms of jobs or access to services, social protection and housing conditions, and more. Civil society organizations amplify their voices and bring attention to their concerns. However, these organizations are rarely empowered to do so, and rarely, if not never, involved in consultations and decision-making processes around the green transition in particular. Also when it comes, for instance, to the development of the territorial just transition plans. And this causes, among other things, of course, a misidentification of the needs in our societies and skews policy solutions in favor of already privileged groups. And this becomes even more relevant in those European countries, and trust me, there's quite a few of them, where civil society organizations face legal, financial, and sometimes even physical threats. In some countries, there's legislation and a negative rhetoric that are really being used systematically to target civil society and restrict freedom of opinion. And shrinking civic space in Europe in the past years makes it even more important to strengthen civil society's capacity to address issues such as the green transition and ensuring that it's a just transition. And I just wanted to conclude with saying that with referencing to the situation and what's happening nowadays. We live in a time of war and in times of global crisis, and there are talks about a wartime economy and of course accelerating the energy transition and therefore stopping our dependence from Russia when it comes to energy, which is of course absolutely crucial. However, accelerating the energy transition cannot be an excuse for taking undemocratic decisions. We must strengthen civil and social dialogue so that when swift and bold the action is needed, like right now, civil society, trade unions can promptly shape the decisions and policies in a meaningful way. And also there's a reflex now to cut red tape on environmental and social aspects in times of crisis. And this, I think, should be reconsidered. And instead, we need to cut legal provisions that are protecting environmentally harmful production and concentration of, for instance, ownership in energy systems, and at the same time strengthen policies and technologies that empower community ownerships and democratic control. So I just wanted to conclude by saying that, yeah, a people-centered just transition, I'm afraid, is not going to be possible to achieve if we don't involve, without trade unions and without a strong civil society in all its diversity. And I hope that we can, all stakeholders, work towards that together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Strengthening civic dialogue here in the center of accelerating the just transition, accelerating the energy transition. We can get inspired, I'm sure, by Françoise. Now, you as the capital of culture of 2022, you will inspire citizens and visitors. I think you also have some pictures that you brought with us that accompany and can exemplify how do you do that. But please, how do you inspire people for the just transition?
Thank you. I said previously, so what we try to do is really create tools of empowerment through participation, long-time thinking, and access to culture. You see on the first, the slide here, a picture of Belleval. This is where we actually are, where our headquarters are. We have the big chance to be able to invest these remnants of the industrial area with what we do. We have one space, the Müllerei, that you just saw. We are filling them with exhibitions. Here is one in collaboration with HEC, House of Electronic Arts in Basel. We're exploring the intersection of art, technology, and digital culture. Here is, for instance, an image of maybe we could go a bit slower, an image of an installation by Cecile Marie Tonn, where you can experience through jackets with sensors, man-made earthquakes. So you can actually create that relation to what is happening on the ground, and in the ground. And she's working with all kinds of archives. So this is to get people in touch with their environment through technology. And I think here we are very much also in the spirit of the new European Bauhaus, although I think we had planned this exhibition even before the new European Bauhaus launched their first calls for proposals. And then we can go on to a next slide. So this is an exhibition that we have with an art school, the Art School of Nancy. It's about breathing, about the very physical relationship that we have to our environment. And here we can see there's a question, how can we measure the air quality or air pollution? There is a part with sensors about what people actually breathe in the whole day. So also there again to create that sensorial connection to the environment, which I think is very important also for a people-centered just transition. And then we have an escape room together in collaboration with the Rotterdam Erasmus University, the Rotterdam School of Management, around the SDG 12 about responsible consumption and production. There we want to give incentives on how we can reduce our consumption, how we can be responsible. It's about fast fashion, it's about packaging, it's about plastics. So it is very, very hands-on, and I think this is to me a way to create empowerment. So to give the opportunity to people to ask questions through arts and culture, and to create also empathy. So what is happening around them, our visitors that are coming to see us here in Ash. I think we have just a very last slide from the escape room, again, where you see very practical and to give very concrete examples as well. And so that's how I hope that we will inspire our public.
Great to see. And just to emphasize here, emotions and senses to be used to feel the transition and relate to transition. Escape room. I think I need to come to Ash to escape from and have that sensation. Great, inspiring examples here. Thank you so much. Maybe looking then back into the field of policy, and Andrea, you are working also closely as part, for instance, of the European Alliance for Just Transition with policymakers, with member states, with the European Parliament. What are your inspirational and mobilizing, inspiring arguments to mobilize political support for a fair transition?
Thank you, Carsten, also for the nice promotional moment for the European Alliance for a Just Transition. Also, if anybody who's watching and listening is interested, we have a website which is without the European.eu. And indeed, it's a group, an informal group of organizations who've come together to cooperate and try to ensure that a just transition, at least from a European level, is a possibility. I think politicians, or in this case, MEPs, for instance, members of the European Parliament, are quite attentive to the issue. I think the main thing that we still have to work on is how to get there, what a just transition actually can be, how it can be achieved. I think we all agree, at least in this alliance, about the objective. It's the roadmap that we are still trying to define, and some MEPs are of course, and some political groups are more attentive to the cause than others, but I think that indeed there's more and more awareness on the urgency and need to ensure a just transition.
Thank you, Andrea. Then maybe looking back to Werner, and here the aspect of inspiring through art is also very much part of, and design in particular, the Bauhaus perspective. So what inspiring aspects can you bring to the table here? Why should we come visit your place here?
Okay, what I think is a little bit in difference to what we hear about ASH. I think ASH is wonderful as a festival, as a complication of all of its aspects and bring it together in the international world. But the other thing, what I think is very important for the transition, or to get a successful transition, is to look at the cultural education and outreach on place. It could be for me a very much important drivers for a successful transition. For example, to strong up local resources and bring it together in a network of European exchange programs. I think this will be very helpful to look on this both sides and integrate it and let it work together. So I think this is one of the projects we are now starting also in Saxonia-Anhalt, together with different partners from technical institutions like Fraunhofer to universities and to one of the cities in Saxonia-Anhalt, which is very on a strongly break of structural breaks. It lost more than 20,000 inhabitants. So it's half of the population. It's one of the brown coal mining areas, very rich area. But now it's the question is how we can change. What can we do? Because we have more than 30 years transformation behind, but they did not really know where it goes to the future. And I thought this is very, very difficult for them to work. And it's also, I think, a question again to the European Union about the networking. How much is the networking in our own community? How much did they work together, go on a place, install some programs, go up into the network and continue elsewhere? So how we can also find a way to fix programs, to have long-term projects, to bring up the time for the change. I thought this is, for me, a very important question. And this is really something that has really to do with the questions how we can bring cultural education and outreach to bring to the people something for the future, to create own activities, to find new ideas. Because not to be always, as I heard in the morning in the session with the commissions, okay, we have the companies and we have satellites. We work together with the companies. But what can the people do for their own? And this is the questions of a diversity in the generation and also the transmission of the generations.
Thank you. Werner, point taken here on cultural education intergenerationally and also sustaining the support. It was mentioned beforehand, continuous support, building trust, and sticking to commitments. We are on the way to close this reflection round, and I would like to maybe look at Marie-Claire first in your conclusion of how can we best facilitate the different arguments here, how to achieve collective and systemic change on personal issues in order to ensure a just transition in European regions. Thanks.
Yeah, I think that probably the best thing to do would be to look at the existing inequalities that are there, at the existing systemic problems that are there, and try to address those. So we've created these inequalities and these issues by doing things a certain way. And so it's not going to work if we just, give the money through projects to the people and groups that already have capacity. We need to be talking about building capacity. It's not going to work if we try to make changes but still prioritize increasing our GDP. We need to be looking at how do we better measure in these regions well-being and progress and how we're doing as a society. So I think it's really taking the actions to address the problems that we all know are there and are quite visible, and that will give us the capacity to transition in a way where it is people-centered.
Thank you, Marie-Claire. Then over to you, Françoise. How do you see that systemic change happening?
Well, as I mentioned before, to me it is about participation, co-creation, empowerment, and creating a long-term or long-time thinking. And they are very much agree with Werner. It is about long-term projects and collaborations. This is also what we have been trying to do with ASH 2022, see what is already here, what is on people's minds in the region, and then try to pick it up from there and maybe move it a bit further. But it is about really formulating long-term collaborations, exchanges, and projects, and we're very much working on the post-22 for ASH as well.
Great to hear, and indeed long-term cooperation. I maybe bring this example here in the work of the Secretariat in the last 3 years. We have seen so much progress with the Just Transition Fund being established, with also not only the coal regions but also the carbon-intensive regions talking to each other. We have now just launched and see the fruits of a new EU exchange between different coal plus regions which are visiting each other and are learning from each other. So there is much progress. We are in the 5th meeting, but more to come. So Werner, from your perspective, how can we make this systemic change happening? Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I think we have to think twice. The one thing is, as Marie-Claire talked about, to have the systematic change in the view in general. And the other thing is that we have to accept that we have very different local situations that we not all can have in our view. I thought it's very also important to look how we can find prototypes, and prototypes in the sense to strong up the resources and to build networks in the sense of long-term distance.
Thank you. And last but not least, Andrea, your concluding words here in this round.
Yes, I'm also gonna add a coin to, policies that really are transformative and tackle the socio-economic inequalities that we all know are at the root, are the root causes of the situations and the crises we are in today. And I think it's empowering social movements and social NGOs and trade unions to really have a say in the conversation is super important. Also through the work that they do, for instance, through citizenship education, when it comes to activities that we do with citizens and people across Europe. So yeah, thank you.
Great. And with that full set of arguments, we have here some messages which I have collected. These are not all. Actually, you will have the recording and can listen to all the messages again. But thank you so much for this fruitful panel. I can just emphasize that you should use the findings of the Cintrend inventory of coping strategies, as we have heard here, differentiating between resist, adapt, and transform. How this is done, find examples here from the research of Marie-Claire. Thank you for sharing. Then also using the various aspects of the new Bauhaus initiative, Julia has outlined several possibilities here to engage, voting for the best prize, but also to use the new urban development fund here and assistance to support your local initiative. I think we have also here emphasized that we should strengthen the civic dialogue here in particular. There were some also mentioning that sometimes these spaces are shrinking, so make sure that you allow and enable public participation, maybe through a laboratory or through other means, an escape room here, escaping, reflecting on how your region escapes from the fossil fuel dependency, as was posed in the chat. Certainly with cultural education, with cultural change happening through education, here emphasized also by Werner, we have a history to carry, but also a future to look at. And here Marie-Claire's also message to address the current challenges, but also the future challenges to come. Both are important. And if we address just one side, we will not advance being a just transition intergenerationally, and also looking at youth, at women, at different stakeholders that are coming to this table. So knowledge making from all these perspectives will empower you. Culture was shown today as a tool to empower you, of empowerment. So the invite is also there to go to ASH and maybe break down your difficulties of abstract concept of cold transition through culture, through experiences, through senses, through emotions. And with that, I would very much like to thank all the participating panelists and presenters. And it is now my pleasure to introduce to you Miriam Bodeva. She is leader of the sustainable growth at the European Commission's DG Regio, for closing this wonderful 5th edition of the Just Transition platform meeting. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Carsten. Good afternoon, everyone. So I have the pleasure to close this session, and I want to convey to you the main messages that we have heard during this 3 days event. First of all, we see that in a difficult context that we are having with different crises happening, this event has conveyed a very positive message, which is that when we are ensuring a just transition, we can look into future with optimism. It shows the good way out. And all participants have demonstrated a strong commitment in ensuring that no one is left behind. So this is a very encouraging message that we have heard. We also have another reason for being optimistic after this 3 days event, which has gathered more than 1,000 participants across Europe, but also outside the EU. We have had different key stakeholders who participated. There was a very good mixture of key stakeholders. We have heard trade unions, NGOs, businesses, national, local and regional authorities, and many other stakeholders. We see that now there is an acceleration in the preparation of the territorial just transition plans that will be supported by the Just Transition Fund. And we see that implementation is now taking off. And in general, many of you were focusing on implementation in their interventions and in their very practical questions. The various sessions showed that there were and there are very concrete opportunities for regions which depend on solid fossil fuels and for carbon-intensive regions. And let me highlight 5 major opportunities. First of all, people. They are the first resource and they are the drivers for change. We have focused on them in this last session. And in other sessions also on youth, skills and jobs. But just transition means also healthy environment, and we have heard about issues such as circular economy or peatland restoration, which are key issues for these regions. And then just transition also comes with a well-managed clean energy transition. The opportunities of REPowerEU have been outlined. The action plan for REPowerEU will be adopted next week, and I hope that all of you will be interested in the outcome of this plan and in supporting this plan. We have also talked about support, funding and programming with the territorial just transition plans, the just transition mechanism, and the support provided by the CREAT and by the Just Transition Platform Secretariat. And finally, just transition is also about communicating and sharing good approaches, be it at EU level with our neighboring countries and globally with the US, India, Indonesia or South Africa. There is, however, no magical wand for all challenges. We have to work on implementation of the territorial just transition plans together with the stakeholders, as many of you have also underlined in this last session. And one of the key conclusions is that there will be no transition taking place without a strong partnership and stakeholder engagement. When we speak about stakeholders, we mean all of them. They are essential. They need to take ownership, and they will create a new dynamic in the region if they are all duly involved with their skills and dynamism. Finally, I wanted to inform you that in order to involve stakeholders further from carbon-intensive regions, and we do it as much as we can, we have also organized the Just Transition Platform working group meetings directly after the Just Transition Platform event, tomorrow on Friday, the 13th of May, and Monday, the 16th of May. This was already presented on Tuesday, and there are still opportunities to join these groups. The ones who are interested should check the new Just Transition Platform website for more information. We also continue to expand the offer of support available through the Just Transition Platform, including technical assistance on the ground as of next year. Finally, on our side, we are already thinking about the next Just Transition Platform event, which will take place in autumn, where we hope to see you all. And we hopefully will hold it physically or in a physical or in hybrid mode. We will involve again all stakeholders, including youth and, of course, very important stakeholders as trade unions, which are very important. And as you know, every Just Transition platform event focused on a specific issue. This time we focused on youth. And we are welcoming new ideas or suggestions from you. Thank you very much for your attention.